Hello, welcome. My name is Kathy. I want to welcome you to lesson number 1 of Prepositions with CINCILINGUA live lessons. If you have a question and you're here live with me, you can look for at the bottom of your screen, there should be an icon that says chat. And if you click on this, it will open up a white area on the right-hand side of your screen. At the bottom is an area for you to type your question, and then I will be able to see the question, and I will answer questions at the end of our lesson today. So today we're going to talk about some prepositions. We're going to talk about for, since, until, during, and while. For, since, and until, I'm going to group those three together, and then during and while, we will group those together. When we talk about for, we talk about the duration, and duration means how long, how long. So you can perhaps live somewhere for 5 years, or maybe you go on vacation for 3 days. Maybe you are talking on the phone or working on the computer for 10 minutes. Those are some examples of using for to tell the duration or how long are you doing something. And since talks also about duration, but it talks about a specific time in the past. The beginning point is important here. So I can say I lived in Cincinnati since 1986. So the beginning of my living in Cincinnati was 1986. Or maybe I can say I have been, I don't know, I have been working at a particular job since February. Until is also about duration, but it says up until the time of. So maybe I plan to live in Cincinnati until 2025. And then in 2025, I will move. Or maybe I can say that, I don't know, that something happens until July, and then in July it will be over. Or maybe we are going to the movie until 9 o'clock, and the movie will end at 9 o'clock. Until talks about up until the time of. So it's going to have a specific ending time. During, we add during to a noun, and together they talk about something happening at the same time as something. So during the movie, something was happening during the movie. Something was happening during the party. In the similar way, we add while to a subject and a verb, and that will help us to explain that something was happening while they waited. Something was happening while he slept. Okay, I have to move my mouse down here to change the next slide. Here we go. All right, so for. I tried to make a picture here to help you understand the difference between for and since and until. For, we know the beginning time and we know the ending time. If you do something for 10 minutes, we know you begin and then 10 minutes later you finish. Or maybe you are at the university for 4 years. You begin and then 4 years later you end. So we know the beginning time, we know the ending time. For, from beginning time until an ending time, and we know how long. When we use since, we're talking about from a particular beginning time until now. We know when the beginning is. So if I say, I have been at work since 8:30 this morning, I know that the beginning time is 8:30. When I use since and I say, I have been at work since 8:30 this morning, unless you are with me and unless you know what time I am talking, we don't really know the ending time. If I say I have been at work since 8:30 this morning, maybe it is 9 o'clock and I have been at work for half an hour. If I say I have been at work since 8:30 this morning and it is 8:30 at night, then I have been at work for 12 hours. So that when we use since, the ending time is not important. We're talking about the beginning time up until now, whenever now is. I could say that I have been studying English since July. The beginning time was July that I started to study English or to study another language, and I have been studying it until now. Maybe now is August and I have been studying for 1 month. Maybe now is February and I have been studying for a lot longer. But when you use since, the important thing is that we know the beginning time. Just the opposite, when we use until, we don't really care so much about what the beginning is, but we know when the ending is. So until is from an unknown time until a specific ending time. Maybe we don't know the beginning or we don't care about the beginning, but we do know the end. So if you say that I will be at work until 9 o'clock tonight, it is not so important what time I started. What we are thinking about right now is I will finish at 9 o'clock tonight. I will be at work until 9 o'clock tonight. Or maybe we say, I was talking on the phone until the lights went out. And when the lights went out, the phone stopped working, and then the phone call is finished. We know that the ending time is the time that the lights went out. So until, we are thinking about what is the end of the activity. Since, we are thinking about what is the beginning of the activity. For, we are thinking about the duration. How long is the activity? Let's see some examples. So, for, from a beginning time until an ending time. I can say boil the spaghetti noodles for 10 minutes. This means that I want you to start, and then I want you to count until 10 minutes is over. And when you see that 10 minutes is over, then that's when you stop boiling the spaghetti. The next example, I will attend the University of Cincinnati for 4 years. So we know that I will begin, and then I will be a student for 4 years, and at the end of 4 years, I will be finished. So we know the beginning time, we know the ending time, so we will use the word for as our preposition. If we change and we use since as the preposition, now we're talking about from a particular beginning time until now. This one says, I have been working since 8:30 this morning. We know the time that I began working. We do not really mention what time it is now. The beginning time was 8:30. You can see here in this little thing, I put the dot, the beginning of 8:30, and it just keeps going until we are now. I have been in Mexico since July. We know that I arrived in Mexico in July, and we do not really mention what time it is now. Maybe it is August and I have not been there very long. Maybe it is December. I have been there a long time. But when we use since, we know that the important thing is the beginning. Since 8:30, since July, since I was 12 years old, since. Now we're looking at until, from an unknown time until a specific ending time. We don't know the beginning, or maybe we don't care so much about the beginning, but we do know the end. So it says, I will stay at the theater until 9 o'clock. We do not mention what time I arrived at the theater, but we know the ending time, that the program at the theater will finish at 9 o'clock, and I will leave the theater at 9 o'clock. I will be there until 9 o'clock. until. Here's another example with until. I was watching TV until the lights went out. We do not mention what time I began watching TV, but we know that the ending time was when the lights went out. Until. I watched until the lights went out. For is a specific time from the beginning to the end. Since we're talking about the beginning time, that's what's important. Until we're talking about the ending time, that's what's important. So I want you to try to help me figure out which is the best preposition to put in the sentence. The picnic was wonderful. And then we're going to say for or since or until it began to rain. The picnic was wonderful. That's what's happening at the beginning, a wonderful picnic. And then it began to rain. What do you think they did when it began to rain? Probably the picnic ended when it began to rain. So we're going to use something that talks about the ending time. The picnic ended when it began to rain. So the picnic was wonderful. Which one of these talks about the ending? Until. Until. The picnic was wonderful until it began to rain. This does not really tell us that the picnic started at 2 o'clock or the picnic lasted for 2 hours. It doesn't really talk about the picnic. We have been at the picnic since noon. What happens that is important here is the ending of the picnic, when it began to rain. And so that's why we're using until. The picnic was wonderful until it began to rain. Your homework is to read, and then we're going to pick for or since or until 30 minutes tonight. The person has some homework. They will begin reading, and then 30 minutes later, they will finish reading. So we know that they have to begin, and then they have to wait 30 minutes, and then they have to stop. So we kind of know the beginning time, and we know the ending time. Do you see the picture here that shows that has a beginning time and an ending time? So this one here has a beginning time and an ending time. Your homework is to read for 30 minutes tonight. To read for 30 minutes. Okay. I have been taking violin lessons. I was 12 years old. I have been taking violin lessons. I was 12 years old. This person is older than 12 now. And we know that they started their violin lessons. They began their violin lessons when they were 12 years old, and they have continued. And we don't really know how old they are now, but we know the beginning was 12 years old. Which one of these, for, since, until, do we talk about the beginning time? It's this one here. The little dot shows when the beginning was, and then it just keeps going until we're ready to be now. So I have been taking violin lessons since I was 12 years old. Since I was 12. Now we're going to talk about the difference between during and while. During and while. Both of these show that two situations are happening at the same time. One, during, uses a noun. The other one, while, uses a subject and a verb. So during the movie, there was a storm. So the storm happened and the movie happened both at the same time. And you say, I felt very sick during the party. So me feeling sick and during the party both happened at the same time. But you can see here that the movie and the party are both nouns. A noun is a person or a place or a thing. Okay, so the movie and the party, we could think of them as places, but I think actually they're kind of things. They're events that were happening. So during the movie, during the event of the movie, because it's a thing that makes it a noun. During the party, because it's an event that happened, it's a noun. Something was happening at that same time. And then we're going to use during because the movie and the party are both nouns. So then when we say while they waited, it started to rain while they waited for the bus. The raining and the waiting for the bus happened at the same time. And the subject here is they. That's who's doing something. And waited is what they are doing. What are they doing? They are waiting. While they are waiting, something is happening at the same time. While they waited for the bus, it began to rain. So they are waiting for the bus and the raining. Both of those things are happening at the same time. While he slept. We were very quiet while he slept. So us being quiet and him sleeping happened at the same time. Who is doing something? He is doing something. What is he doing? He is sleeping. And we could put a name there. We could say while John slept or while my father slept. Instead of while they waited, it could be while Susan waited, while Susan and Mary waited. We could put a name there, but there is a person doing something, and then we tell what they are doing. That makes a subject and a verb. And if we have a subject and a verb, then we will use while, and we will not use during. We want to use during when we have a noun. Let's see some examples. Sheila fell asleep, and then the next word is work. So we need to decide, are we going to say Sheila fell asleep during work? Sheila fell asleep while work. What do you think? When we look at work, do you think that work is a noun or is work a subject and a verb? Let me show you the answer here. Sheila fell asleep during work. Work is a noun. And so because work is a noun, we are going to say during work. Sheila fell asleep during work. Or Sheila fell asleep. She was working. She was working. What do you think about this? Do you think we have a noun or do you think we have a subject and a verb? This one is a little bit easier, I think. Sheila fell asleep while she was working. She was working, and actually working could also be considered to be part of that verb. So working could be green also. But she was working. She was working. Who is doing something? She is. What is she doing? She was working. So instead of using during, we will use while. Sheila fell asleep while she was working, or Sheila fell asleep during work. Both of those are possible. Okay, the next one. My phone started to ring. We were watching the movie. This is not very good. You should have your phone turned off when you are watching a movie. What do you think? Do you think we will say during we were watching the movie or while we were watching a movie? We have to look at what comes after this line. We were watching the movie. We is the subject who is doing something. And what are we doing? Watching the movie. So my phone started to ring while we were watching. While we were watching. Who's doing something? We are. What are we doing? We are watching. And so the phone started to ring while we were watching the movie. The phone started to ring, and then we have just the movie, the movie. In this case, the movie is going to be a noun. And so when we have the movie, we can say the phone started to ring during the movie, during the movie. So either while we were watching the movie or during the movie. So here is a review. When we want to use for, we're going to be talking about a beginning time until an ending time. and we know how long. So it says your homework is to read for 30 minutes tonight. Can you think of another example of when you would use for, a beginning and an ending? What about how long will the movie last? If you're trying to plan, maybe you need to get a babysitter to watch your children while you go to the movie. Or maybe you need to plan a ride to get to the movie and a ride to get home. How long will we be at the movie? The movie will last. The movie will happen for 2 hours. The movie will be playing for 2 hours. It begins, and then 2 hours later it will be finished for 2 hours. How long do you usually eat your dinner? Some places people eat dinner for a long time. Maybe they eat dinner for 3 hours. Other people eat a very short dinner. They only eat dinner for 30 minutes. Okay, when we use the word since tells us that it is from a beginning time until now. This time we know the beginning. We know the beginning of this. So I have taken violin lessons, or I have been taking violin lessons since I was 12 years old. The beginning of my violin lessons is when I was 12. Perhaps I am 13 right now. I have been taking violin for 1 year. Maybe I'm 20 years old. I have been taking violin for 8 years. I don't know. Someone might ask you, how long have you been studying English? And you can say, I have been studying English since October. Maybe you began in October, since October. October was the beginning of your studying English. If you began to study English in 2021, you can say, I have been studying English since 2021. How long have you been at your job? When did you begin your job? The job that you have right now. You could say, I have been at my job since 2016, or I have been at my job. I have been working at this same job since January. Since. We are talking about the beginning time of doing something. Until. From an unknown time until a specific ending time. We don't know the beginning, or maybe we are just not saying the beginning, but we do know the end. The picnic was wonderful until it began to rain. I am sure that the people at the picnic know what time the picnic started. They were there. They know what time the picnic started. But the starting of the picnic is not the important part in this sentence. In this sentence, the important thing for us is that the picnic finished when it began to rain. So the picnic was wonderful until it began to rain. Until it began to rain. Can you think of another thing that might stop an activity? We also had something happen until the lights went out. Or I stayed awake until my roommate told me, turn off the light. Then I had to turn off the light, and then I fell asleep. Or we can say until, and then we say a specific time. I will stay at work until 5 o'clock today. Or I will stay at work until I am finished with every report I need to write. So that is not a specific time, but I will stay at work and I will continue working until every report is written and finished. Until. Let's go back just one more time through these, okay? We have for, talking about a particular time, a beginning time and an ending time. We said boil the spaghetti for 10 minutes. How long do you bake a cake, do you think? bake the cake for maybe 30 minutes. Maybe a cake stays in the oven for 30 minutes. Perhaps you will say, we will go to the beach for 7 days. That would be a nice treat, to go to the beach for 7 days. All right, let's talk just a couple more examples about since. And remember, since we are focusing, we are thinking about the beginning time. The important thing is the beginning time. I have been studying at CINCILINGUA since. When did you begin to be a student at CINCILINGUA? Since October, since last week, since 2021. When did you become a student at CINCILINGUA? This one, I think, is a good to practice when you talk about the example I gave before. How long have you studied English? I have studied English since. Or if you want to talk about how long you have lived in a particular place. If you moved to somewhere and someone says, how long have you lived in this new area? I have lived in Ohio since I was 2 years old. I was actually born in Florida, and my family moved to Ohio when I was 2 years old. So I have lived in Ohio since I was 2 years old. That was a long time ago. How long will I live in Ohio? I don't know. I will live in Ohio until I think of a reason to move. But right now, I don't have any reason to move away from Ohio. So it is okay for me to stay in Ohio until, when we use until, we are talking about the ending time, the ending time. So if we want to say, I will go on vacation until December 30th, then we know that the vacation is going to be over on the 30th of December. Let's do a review now of during and while. During, we use during when we use a noun. We use while when we have a subject and a verb. And this is about two activities happening at the same time. So we had a nice conversation while we were eating, because if we say while we were eating, we is the subject and we're eating is the action that we were doing. That's our verb. We had a nice conversation while we were eating. Or I could say we had a nice conversation during dinner or during lunch, because lunch or dinner, that is a noun. We had a very nice conversation during dinner. We had a very nice conversation while we ate. We were talking to each other. I enjoyed it very much. It was a nice conversation. And the talking happened during the meal. The talking happened at the same time as the meal. And so because the two things happened at the same time, we will use during or we will use while. Let me think of one more example here. You should not use your cell phone while you are driving. You should not use your cell phone while you are driving. So while, and then who is doing something? You are. And what are you doing? You are driving. So while, with a subject of you and a verb of driving. You should not use your cell phone while you are driving. Okay, let's go to the next slide here. And this slide says, thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you at the next lesson for CINCILINGUA live lessons. I hope that this lesson about prepositions helped you to understand the difference between for and since and until, and then also the difference between during and while. My name again is Kathy, and I hope to see you again at the next lesson. Thank you so much for coming.